So imagine, some young person picks up the habit of smoking. They're not going to get sick from smoking in the first week, first month, or first year, or maybe not even the 10 years or 20 years, or maybe even 30 years. They're still fine. And the time frame with vitamin A toxicity is about the same. It's in decades typically, depending on, the circumstances, I suppose. And, there's lots of factors involved. So, having, obviously food with vitamin A in it, you're not going to get immediately sick. It's the accumulation of that over decades of time.
Hi, this is Owen Robinson, and welcome to the Rejuvenate Podcast. This episode is very special. That's the first one that we've got a guest being interviewed, and our guest is Grant Genereux. Grant is a very interesting guy, as you're going to discover, and he really opened my eyes to something quite interesting, and it's about vitamin A. So vitamin A is the first vitamin to ever be discovered, and Grant has some very interesting things to say about it. Now, the way that I have structured this video is like the interview is purposeful. In the first half of the interview, roughly 45 minutes, we're going to be talking purely about mainstream science but that most people are not aware of. And so this is the impacts of vitamin A, the different types of vitamin A, the effects of those different types of vitamin A. And all of that is pulled from an abundance of pretty much uncontested scientific literature. And Grant does share quite a few references, and you should see those underneath the video if you're watching this on YouTube. So that's very, very mainstream. Now, in the second half of the interview, then we talk about something that is a lot more speculative, because of course what we're talking about is the toxicity of vitamin A and how different forms of vitamin A can be turned into your body into other substances, which can be even more toxic. But then there's that question hanging in the air of well, how much is too toxic? And of course, that depends from person to person. But what we'll speculate about is that actually, possibly, way less might be toxic than we think it is. And I say to Grant at the beginning of the interview that I think that the book he wrote could be one of the most important books written in the last 100 years. And I have to say, from my personal experience, I stand by that statement that I'm about to make. Listening to what he says and incorporating some of it has made a massive difference to me and my health. It's the piece that I haven't shared up until now. I've kind of gradually been sharing different pieces of what's helped me, as well as, of course, what's helped others in the episodes. But this is one of the main big ones that really made a difference to me. I already talked about lead in a previous episode and how I had high levels of that and how that caused a problem. Well, I was also tested for vitamin A, and I also had excessive levels of that. And doesn't seem like such a big deal because it's a vitamin, but as you'll learn about in this episode, perhaps it can be a big deal. Grant is an excellent author. I thoroughly recommend checking out his work, as we'll talk about during the video and at the end. And I just want to say, before we get into it, in order to introduce Grant, to just say what a treasure I think he is. He is someone, and I'm not disparaging people who make this into a business. It's what I've done, because why not, right? If it's something that you love, then make it your life's work, make it what you do full time if you can. So obviously I'm not disparaging that on anyone, but I do know that when you do that, it comes with a certain level of people are, less trustworthy. And I hope that they seem less trustworthy to people. And I hope that I've mitigated that with these podcasts to a large degree, because as you may well have realized, the vast majority of what I recommend and promote on this podcast, I don't sell. None of my companies sell. So I hope that helps you to trust me and to realize that I'm just recommending it to you because it's good. And so ditto with Grant. There's no financial benefit to me recommending them whatsoever. But anyway, my point is more that Grant has, I don't think he's ever made a penny from his work. He's got free books on his website that are available to download for free. He's got, many articles. He's done studies, and he's not been funded. No one customer benefactor has ever given him a penny to do this research, has ever given him a penny for any product in relation to the work that we're going to talk about today. So he really is doing it just because he believes in it. He is an engineer by trade. I believe he has done that full time for a long time. And so he's purely doing this for the love. So if that matters to you, if that means that you can trust him more, then great, please do. So without further ado, someone who, as I said, I think has got very high levels of integrity, very high levels of caring about the human race and wanting to help them, and with a very, very interesting perspective that you may not have heard before. Grant Genereux. So, Grant, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. I was thrilled when you said yes.
Great. No, glad to do it. And anything that helps get the message out there, I very much appreciate.
Yeah, and the reason why being, I read one of your books, which I'd highly recommend that all of our viewers check out after they watch this or listen to this, and that's Poison for Profits. And I have to say that I feel like that book might, I guess the key word is might. I can't be certain, but it might be the most important book written in the last 100 years. I mean, it's incredibly impactful if what you're saying is true. And I'm inclined to believe that it is, but that's what we're going to explore and look into today. And of course, I can't be sure. I'm relatively new to this world, so I'm of this topic. So I'm very keen to find out more and share more with my audience. So I guess the first thing that I would want to so let's get straight into it, right?
Sure.
Obviously, people know from the title that we're talking about vitamin A and the various forms of it, and how an excess of it can be much more damaging than people may realize. So that will be the starting point, and then I think we'll progress from there. So my first question would be: I understand from reading your book that retinoic acid is one of the most, or the most, you can tell us, toxic forms of vitamin A. So why is it so toxic? What is it about retinoic acid that makes it so damaging to the body, or at least an excess of it makes it so damaging to the body? And how does it cause that damage, and what kind of damage does it cause?
Well, that's a big question. It'll take a while to answer that, but it's worthwhile.
That's okay.
Worthwhile because it'll take us down right into the mechanism of how that happens and why that happens. So you're right. Retinoic acid is regarded as kind of the most toxic form of vitamin A. And there's a whole myriad of molecules that fit under the vitamin A umbrella. You've got kind of the least toxic beta carotenes, and those will split into retinol aldehydes, and from there you can get into retinol esters, and there's this hierarchy of toxicity. So beta carotenes would be the least, retinol aldehydes kind of medium, retinol esters are kind of the next most toxic, and then retinoic acid is the most toxic. And just to understand that. And
sorry to interrupt, where does retinol fit into that hierarchy?
Well, retinol is
with an OL at the end.
Yeah, it's an alcohol, so it's toxic. It's documented to be too toxic to be in serum unwrapped, meaning outside of this protective wrapper protein that is usually carried in blood. So it is definitely toxic on its own, but it's not. So what happens with vitamin A, it goes through this metabolism sequence. It's really a catabolism sequence, and where the body starts breaking it down. And as it does that, it actually gets more toxic. But kind of specifically, retinoic acid is regarded as the active form of vitamin A. So these other forms of vitamin A, before they're converted into retinoic acid, are considered kind of inactive, but it becomes active once it converts into retinoic acid. And what happens with retinoic acid, it actually gets through the cell membrane very quickly, gets into the mitochondria, gets into the nucleus of the cell, and binds with RNA and DNA. And once it binds to your cellular DNA, I believe is a permanent, chemical bond there. And the cell has its DNA compromised, and the cell is no longer producing proper proteins. Because, with DNA and RNA through transcription, this very delicate weaving machine, all of a sudden you've got this extra molecule stuck in the middle of it, and the cell doesn't produce the proper proteins. And so, consequent to that, what happens is, a whole myriad of things. One is, obviously, if the cell's no longer able to produce proper proteins, it can't actually perform its proper function. And, through maintenance and everything else that the cell needs to do, it can't do that. The DNA has been poisoned. Secondly, what happens as the cell starts to present these or reject these defective proteins that have been induced by the retinoic acid, the immune system kicks in and starts attacking those cells, because the immune system detects those proteins as kind of foreign species, most certainly not belonging in the human body, and they attack those cells, and then you have autoimmunity. So there's a long detailed spectrum of the possibilities of these defective proteins. In the 1990s, it was documented to be about 300 different gene expressions. So in the medical literature, they'll describe these as gene expressions, which are really measured by the presence of these proteins. And then by 2010, it was up to 500 different gene expressions induced by retinoic acid. So it's just a very large number of combinations. And my belief is the reason you have such a large combination of, quote, gene expressions induced by retinoic acid is that it's completely or almost completely random where it attaches to the DNA and RNA. And, depending on that specific position that it attaches to, you're going to get a different protein generated. And so you have to know the readers should know, our viewers should know that, the DNA, RNA is this fantastic little intricate weaving machine that weaves together proteins. And anything that gets stuck in the middle of the pattern there is going to mess it up. And so this is why it's toxic. Now, I'm not just claiming that retinoic acid is toxic. It's super well documented in the medical literature, and it's been used as a chemotherapy drug for 30 years. So we have a vitamin that
was going to be my next.
Go ahead.
That was going to be my next question, Grant, because one of the things that fascinated me about your book is, I've heard a lot of alternative health theories, and a lot of them are backed by either no science or very little science. And so while they may actually be accurate, who knows, there's very little evidence that they are. Can you tell us, roughly how many studies there are supporting the idea that retinoic acid is toxic?
Well, yeah.
Roughly. I'm sure you haven't memorized them all.
Well, it's in the hundreds probably that talk about the toxicity of vitamin A in general, and probably very specifically, 30 or 40 that would talk about specifically retinoic acid and the use of retinoic acid in chemotherapy. But, your viewers are fortunate if they're really interested in this topic, because vitamin A is probably one of the most studied molecules in all of medical science. I did do a meta-analysis a number of years back on how many studies have been done on vitamin A. And I think it was 10,000 or more. And then, maybe 400 or 500 looking specifically at the toxicity. So the toxicity of vitamin A has been known for a very long time. And I think most importantly, the toxicity was best understood in the early research back in the 1940s, 30s, 50s, through animal studies and deliberately poisoning animals with vitamin A and looking at the effects of that poisoning. Now, those early researchers wouldn't have known that that's actually retinoic acid that's causing the damage in these animals or the health issues in these animals. But that's the metabolism of vitamin A. It converts into retinoic acid, has a horrible consequence, and animals get very sick or die. I can name a few of those studies if that's of interest.
No, that's great.
Okay.
We'll include some. We'll include a couple of links. Maybe we'll get to that, but I want to make this super relatable for people because that's really interesting in terms of the science. But how does that manifest in the human body? How would I know as a person watching, listening to this, that this may be related to me, right? Like, what problems can this cause when you have these proteins that are not being created correctly by the DNA, if I've understood that?
Yeah.
Right.
So there is a well-known list of symptoms of vitamin A toxicity. And I'm going to say, I don't know, 40 or 50 kind of major kind of known health issues due to vitamin A toxicity. In the literature, it's called hypervitaminosis A. Either too much, you're just getting too much vitamin A, or for some reason you've been exposed to retinoic acid. So, and that could happen, and often does happen with people that take an acne drug that's based on vitamin A called accutane. And there's just a long list of devastating health consequences. And I'll kind of most commonly, kind of early symptoms would be depression, anxiety, lots of cognitive issues, memory loss, chronic fatigue. Those are kind of overall sense of losing your sense of well-being. But then kind of more specific, I'll just think maybe from the top of the head down to the bottom of the feet. So hair loss, rapid hair loss is definitely a sign of vitamin A toxicity. Skin issues, eczema, psoriasis, inflamed skin, dry skin. One of the key symptoms of vitamin A toxicity is dry eyes. So your eyes just being dry, maybe extra dry at night. Your glands and your eyelids are not functioning properly because they've been blocked up and your eyes become dry.
Would that include your sinuses as well?
Sure.
Dry sinuses?
Yeah. And so maybe I'll get through that list and then we'll talk about, okay, how is that happening and why is that happening? So further down, I guess, I think tinnitus, ringing in the ears, is probably a pretty common symptom. Joint pain, twisting with the jaw, crooked teeth, pressure in the brain. So this is actually one of the other really early symptoms of too much vitamin A is intracranial pressure and inflammation on the brain. Kind of going down, inflamed esophagus, inflamed lungs, asthma, kidney issues, weight gain, signs of early diabetes, joint and bone problems, GI issues, Crohn's disease, colitis, muscle fatigue. It's, there's just a long list. So, if the other thing I need to be really clear about is the time frame, right? And this is the tricky thing about vitamin A toxicity, is the time frame that's involved is huge, and it's really hard, I think, for the average person to kind of get their head around that. So I just want to maybe state that. I kind of use the analogy of smoking. So imagine, some young person picks up the habit of smoking. They're not going to get sick from smoking in the first week, first month, or first year, or maybe not even the 10 years or 20 years, or maybe even 30 years. They're still fine. And the time frame with vitamin A toxicity is about the same. It's in decades typically, depending on, the circumstances, I suppose. And, there's lots of factors involved. So, having, obviously food with vitamin A in it, you're not going to get immediately sick. It's the accumulation of that over decades of time that starts to add up and build up. And if your body's not dealing with it properly, then more of that vitamin A a higher percentage of the vitamin A that you're consuming is slowly converting into retinoic acid. And you're actually, internally giving yourself chemotherapy.
Interesting. So you said retinoic acid is used as a chemotherapy drug, and you said it's also used as an acne drug.
Right.
And of course, chemotherapy drugs, they're used because they kill cells, right? So in essence, is that what you're saying, that's what retinoic acid is doing?
Yes. So one of the hallmarks of retinoic acid are kind of, it's actually in the very definition of, the vitamin A activity. It drives stem cell replication. So stem cells that are exposed to retinoic acid start to replicate faster. And it's documented to be used for stem cell differentiation, meaning So, stem cells are immature cells in your body, either in your bone marrow, or let's say typically in your skin, or a lot of tissues in the body. All ducts, all glands, all tubular structures within the body, or cardiovascular system. Like so many tissues in the body have stem cells. When they're exposed to retinoic acid has this interesting property where it drives them to replicate faster. So, kind of a higher rate of growth. But if it goes too fast, then it causes inflammation. This is super well documented in the medical literature. And that function of retinoic acid to drive stem cells into a higher rate of replication is why retinoic acid is used and has been used in dermatology for about 30 years as a skin thickening agent, typically for women that are concerned about wrinkles and thin skin. There's a product like Retin A that they put on as a skin cream. And in the short term, it actually works because what it's doing is driving up the replication rate of the stem cells in the skin, and the skin becomes thicker, fuller, and the wrinkles kind of get smoothed out. But in the long term, it's going to, devastate the skin and, completely, I shouldn't say completely, but permanently damage it. That's well regarded in dermatology. So, that's, it's kind of 30 years or more of history of retinoic acid use in dermatology and that effect. So, back to the glands and why, you might have dry eyes or nasal problems is because, very small glands or ducts in your body, the lining of those ducts is an epithelium. In the epithelium, there's what's called a basal membrane, and then stem cells that line that. And those stem cells are like the body's kind of perpetual source of new cells. So as you lose cells from the outer layer of that tissue, the stem cells, they replicate and grow naturally to kind of maintain the structure of that skin. But if you drive it too fast, you'll plug up that gland or that duct, and now, like with the eyes, now your tear ducts aren't working properly anymore, and you'll have dry eyes. So that's kind of the mechanism. But that's even without the inflammation that's caused, right? So the immune system's not going to sit by and just watch all this happen without doing its best to kind of try to get things under control.
Interesting. So the list you gave of things that could go wrong with the body, and I remember a few off the top of my head that you didn't say, like hypothyroidism is another one.
Yeah.
That vitamin A toxicity can cause. And, as I said, I've been in this alternative health world for a while, and there are a few things like hypothyroidism, mold toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, that if you list the symptoms, it is kind of like almost everything because it is such a systemic inflammation creating issue. So is there anything that differentiates vitamin A toxicity from other kind of toxicities that could give people an early warning sign that it's this kind of toxicity that's bothering me, not perhaps another one? Like, I'll give you an example with mold toxicity. They say, that there's a laundry list of problems it can cause, but one of the signs is that you get little electric shocks, when you touch things, like much more commonly than other people. Okay. And it's like, especially neurological. I think you've already said one, which is this tendency for dryness, especially in the eyes, and I guess the mucous membranes. Is there any other kind of telltale signs that in your years of experience now, you're like, that looks like that it's usually very predictive of vitamin A?
I think I would kind of direct people to kind of just get online and just look up the symptoms of vitamin A toxicity. It's a well-established list, but you're right, it's a lot of overlap with other toxicity conditions. And so to kind of try to rule one thing out, versus something else, I don't know. But I would say that, these things work synergistically. So, just because, maybe you've got a mold condition, well, maybe your vitamin A is actually contributing to that, or vice versa, right? It's like you're getting kind of a double whammy kind of thing if you're getting too much vitamin A and exposed to some other toxic environment. Like, sure, there's lots of toxins like, arsenic or something like that would have kind of similar kind of responses. I think a really good one would be poison ivy, like a poison ivy rash, if people are familiar with that, and you start to see eczema, or I pronounce it eczema here in Canada. That's eczema is in my mind is 100% guaranteed caused by vitamin A toxicity. And I like to use...
See, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
One of those telltale signs. That's perfect. Yeah.
Eczema is a really good one. I think psoriasis, asthma. Those would be, and lots of neurological issues. Depression, anxiety. You can go. There's a really good little graphic on a website called acne.org, and if you go to accutane, which is that chemotherapy drug, which is also used for acne, and that website has this diagram of a human body with kind of every organ and every tissue with a arrow going to it and saying, okay, this is a symptom of vitamin A toxicity, and it literally covers the body from head to toe. It's like nothing is spared from vitamin A toxicity. I think one tissue that's kind of less susceptible is actually muscle tissue, because muscle does not have those stem cells. So they're a little bit more immune. I wouldn't say fully immune, but more resistant to vitamin A toxicity than other tissues that do have stem cells.
Interesting. So it's just only the non-important areas that are susceptible, like the brain and the nervous system and the organs. I'm joking, sorry. Mm-hmm. Okay, so fascinating. Yeah, when I looked up accutane, it said that it was the only drug that pharmaceutical prescribed medication that if you take it and you're a woman, you have to take birth control pill with it because it's so dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's amazing. That's from an industry that said Vioxx and all kinds of things were safe, right? And they still say it's that dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Let me talk about that for a second. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
please.
I was just going to say, it's not only...
No, I'd like you to comment.
Yeah. So if you go get a prescription for accutane, and this really kind of boils my blood. I have no, firsthand experience with myself or anyone in my family with accutane, so I don't have an axe to grind. But this is just absolutely ridiculous that this product is on the market. Imagine a teenager going into their doctor with a little bit of acne, and the doctor gives them a prescription for accutane, which is chemotherapy. So for God's sakes, kids going in, they got acne, and the doctor puts them on chemotherapy. Okay, fine. If it worked and had few side effects, fine. It seems like the nuclear option for trying to get rid of acne, in my opinion. But the devastation, so many people have contacted me, so many young people have contacted me, and their lives have been absolutely destroyed by this drug. There's a lot of suicides associated with it. So a kid doesn't feel well about themselves, a little bit of acne, they go into the doctor, they get accutane, and now they feel so depressed and so, just devastated that they end up killing themselves. And we're not talking tens of people, it's hundreds, or maybe, I'm sure it's thousands of people. And then, with that prescription, there's a black box label on the product that says, you have to enter into this agreement if you're a woman that you'll be on 2 forms of birth control, to get the prescription. And then if you happen to get pregnant, the go-to measure is abortion, because accutane is as toxic to the fetus as is thalidomide. And it's like, what are we doing?
Wow.
It's like, wow. And how is this product still on the market? We better stop talking about it because my blood's starting to boil already.
Well, that's okay. So that leads me perfectly to something you mentioned earlier, but I'd like to go into more depth about it because I feel, and my experience of trying to explain this so far has been one of the hardest points for people to really comprehend and take in. And so there's going to be people listening to this, and I know them, who are like, okay, I know about this. I've taken accutane. It's terrible, right?
Yeah.
But there'll be a lot of other people watching or listening who are like, okay, Elwyn, but I don't take accutane. I've never had chemotherapy. And you know what? I haven't even eaten any animal foods. And, I had a client a couple of weeks ago who said that, she's been on a plant-based diet pretty much consistently for like 20 years now.
Right.
And we looked at her blood test results, and her retinol was right at the top of the reference range.
Okay.
And as we'll discuss later, you don't really want your retinol to be anywhere near the top of a reference range.
Right.
And she was like, how is that possible? Because she doesn't eat eggs, she doesn't eat butter, she doesn't eat meat, she never eats liver. And so could you please break down a little bit more, like, the process of how someone, even if they've never had any of that stuff, could still have high levels of retinol and high levels of retinoic acid?
Sure. Yeah, that's really straightforward, actually. So you have to understand that, all vitamin A, originates in plants. So it originates in plants as the carotenoids. So these are molecules that plants use to absorb sun, they're highly light sensitive molecules. Plants use them as part of photosynthesis. They absorb sunlight very well. So even without ever eating any animal products, if you're eating a lot of vegetables and certain maybe certain fruits, I suppose, they're high in the carotenoids, in beta carotene. And when you ingest those, a certain percentage of that's going to be absorbed. And the beta carotene molecule is really a double-ended retinol molecule, and it's a mirror image, and you just split it in half at the center. So there's an enzyme that splits it in half, and now you have two retinol. I'm being kind of specific with the terminology. We just call them retinol molecules, and now you have a lot of vitamin A in your body. I think I'll leave it. I have a comment to make about plant versus animal, and I think that's just the wrong discussion. People shouldn't be having that discussion, but we can talk about that maybe later. Yeah.
Well, it's a big discussion and it's a controversial one. So one controversy at a time. But I guess the point is, plant or animal, some foods have high levels of this stuff.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And when you said a beta carotene is turned into a retinol, that's short for retinaldehyde.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So that's an aldehyde. That's like formaldehyde.
Yeah.
That's like the aldehydes that they say, you want to be careful of eating a lot of burnt food because that's high in aldehydes.
Right.
So wow. So beta carotene. So having a lot of carrots, sweet potatoes, stuff like that, your body literally takes that molecule, breaks it in two, and each of those molecules is an aldehyde.
Yeah. If someone just does a Google search for beta carotene, you see this kind of symmetrical molecule. I guess it's called a chiral molecule, because in the middle, it's got a mirror image going out to each side, and each side of that molecule is a retinol molecule. So that is vitamin A. So in the literature, the double-ended molecule is called beta carotene, and there's like 26 different versions of it. But you split it in half, and each side of it is a retinol molecule, and that's on its way to becoming, toxic potentially in the long run. So people need to.
So the aldehyde enzyme. Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. So the aldehyde enzyme or gene, the thing that breaks down the aldehyde is the same thing that breaks down alcohol, ultimately, right?
Yes.
And it's the same thing that ultimately breaks down histamine, I think, or one of the ways that histamine is broken down.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Okay. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, commenters. And so, I was starting to think, I wonder if the body's overloaded with if the body's overloaded with beta carotene even, then the person might not be able to break down all the other toxic aldehydes that they're taking in as easily. Or if someone's drinking a lot of alcohol every day, maybe they're not able to break down the retinol. Is that accurate?
Absolutely accurate. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And then how does that get turned into retinoic acid, which we've just said, because, we've kind of scared people a little bit with it's so dangerous, it's as bad as thalidomide.
Well.
And now we're also saying that, and look, there's nothing wrong with scaring people if it's genuine, right? If it actually is, dangerous.
Yeah, well, I don't want to scare people. And I think, once again, people need to understand the timeline, the time frame, right? So time is a huge factor here, literally talking decades, right? So no one needs to be, afraid of something here. This, and humans have been dealing with retinol and beta carotene throughout our evolution, our God's creation. We're very well prepared to deal with this, but on a reasonable basis, right? And so that's where things have gone off the rails. We no longer consume it on a reasonable basis, and it accumulates.
So that's the question I wanted to get to. Would it even be possible for, if you had loads of natural carotenoids, would it be possible to build up to the same level as you get from accutane, or is it not anywhere near as much. How does it compare? That was a question I was going to ask.
So in the literature, they kind of, well, they're not kind of, they do separate this into what they call a chronic toxicity or an acute toxicity. So if you take accutane and take a certain dose of it, it's an acute poisoning. So, you see the results of that in a matter of days, weeks, or months, let's say. Where chronic toxicity, we're talking years and decades, just kind of the slow, progressive accumulation of it. And the other thing people need to understand, we're talking molecules, right? And so you have like 1 trillion cells in your body or more, whatever it is. And you're ingesting, let's say you have a pizza and it has beta carotene in it, it's got some vitamin A in it. And some of those vitamin A molecules, well, what should happen naturally is as those molecules come into your bloodstream, very quickly, like within seconds, the liver scrubs it out of the serum and traps it into the liver. So the liver is your major defense organ that's taking care of this for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You're not going to experience an acute toxicity from eating something like a pizza. But some of it does not get captured by the liver. It doesn't get captured fast enough, and those molecules then enter into cells, right? And so depending on the dose and kind of the state of the health of your cell membranes, how fast it gets into the cells and how many cells it gets into is highly variable. But, let's say you poison, a couple thousand cells a day with retinol. It's no big deal because those cells are going to die off, and, as part of that epithelium, they're going to get replaced, and, the body can deal with this. It just gets to the point where you will get more and more vitamin A staying in serum longer, poisoning more and more cells. And eventually, trillions of cells, you end up with, a couple billion cells that are now poisoned, kind of maybe, specifically in kind of one tissue or organ, or most likely spread out through the whole body. You start to have this overall degradation of your health because these cells, when they're poisoned, they're not doing their proper function anymore because their DNA is damaged, and you're going to slowly get sick. Now, what happens, kind of, what really started me on this whole journey was, a lot of autoimmune diseases, there's a well-documented set of trigger foods, right? So some people, they do have milk or dairy or eggs or eat a pizza and they have a big flare-up, right? And it's like, what the hell? What happened there? Well, what happened was they surged their vitamin A intake and had an acute reaction to it. So hopefully, we kind of glossed over exactly, how does a retinol get converted into retinoic acid, but it's through an enzyme. It happens in the nucleus of the cell. It's through the retinol dehydrogenase enzyme. That's what converts it into retinoic acid. And from there, it's going to get into the DNA or RNA of cells.
And the crazy thing, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is like that conversion has to happen, right? It's not like your body can either do that or get rid of it. It has to convert it into that toxic form to get rid of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think once it gets inside of the nucleus of the cell, it's going to go through the reaction. But there's a lot of vitamin A you ingest that is not going to get down that pathway because the liver is going to capture it. It's going to store it in a fat and excrete it with a bile. So if you have a well-functioning liver, it's taking out the garbage on a daily basis, and a lot of that garbage is, the retinoids going out with bile. So it's not like all of those molecules get converted to retinoic acid, a certain percentage of them, but I think you're right. I think once it's inside the cell, it's destined to go through that retinoic acid pathway. And
I imagine that percentage is going to go up significantly based on what you just said if the person is experiencing cholestasis, which we talked about in a previous episode.
Yes. Yes. And that's a very, very risky position for someone to be in my opinion. That's a tough spot.
Is there anything you want to say on cholestasis or?
Well, not really.
Okay.
But, in general, what's happening, the liver's not functioning as smoothly or as efficiently as it should be in expelling bile, and you end up getting more bile being recirculated into your blood. And, as that condition gets worse and worse, you're just going to have a lot more vitamin A circulating in your blood. I don't really care about the form of it. Vitamin A, retinol, or retinal, or retinoic acid is just more of it in your serum, and you're going to definitely feel the effects of it.
Now, as you said, throughout all of history, pretty much, we would have had to deal with some level of this, right? Either in plant food or animal foods. So our body is adapted to it quite well compared to many of the chemicals which have only recently been invented.
Right.
And so that, there's no need to freak out about it, right? Unless we're having super high doses in, form of accutane and stuff like we talked about. But as you said, it's a thing that saturates and builds up over time. And so I guess at the very least, as much as we, the average person who's maybe not, extremely committed to trying extreme new strategies to be healthy, they might want to say, okay, I'll have some vitamin A, but maybe to stop it getting to that point where it builds up so much that it could cause a problem, I might want to avoid the highest sources of vitamin A. Would that be a sound strategy from your perspective?
I think that's absolutely spot on. I would say, if someone's younger and healthy and, doing well, then they don't need to do anything extreme. But, avoiding the, what I call the big ticket items for vitamin A would be extremely prudent, because it all adds up, right? It's just it's little incremental amounts every day add up. So yeah, spot on.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code REJUVENATE. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code REJUVENATE for 20% off today.
Yeah, just like with mercury, they say, you could have 1,000 portions of anchovy and it would equal the same as one portion of tuna or swordfish, So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think it's in terms of mercury intake.
Okay.
And so you can have a hell of a lot of the small fish and it's okay, but you want to avoid the large fish that are very high in mercury. So something maybe similar with vitamin A is to avoid the highest, both plant and animal sources of vitamin A.
Yes.
So what would you put in that category for those people who are generally, as you say, healthy and young, but they just want to avoid it building up over time excessively?
So in the plant world, spinach, kale, those are really high vitamin A sources. Sweet potatoes, just absolutely scratch them off the list, off the menu forever. Carrots, crazy thing, a lot of food colorings are based on beta carotene. It was a big shift in the industry to go from synthetic food colors to quote natural food colors. But those natural food colors are made from beta carotene for the most part. So, stay away from foods that have a lot of artificial colors. The other foods to stay away from, big time, are the seed oils, something especially like canola oil. You look at canola oils, it's got that yellow color to it. And what that is, it's a beta carotene inside that oil. And so, definitely off the menu. In, animal products, no liver, no kidneys. Those two organs are just, should be off the menu for everybody for the rest of time. Those would be kind of the big ticket items, I think.
And it's interesting, right? Because I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but those are often the things that people eat because they want to be healthy, right? I'm going to have sweet potatoes instead of normal potatoes because they're better for you. And, I'm going to have spinach and kale. And then, if they're not into that and they're more of a carnivore paleo type, then they're like, I'm going to have lots of liver because it's full of nutrition. It's so interesting to hear that. And again, we want to remind people here, this is not Grant's opinion. There are a very large amount of studies, as you said, around 500 or so, that back up the issue of vitamin A excess being extremely dangerous, right?
Yeah, and I can, maybe I'll send you some links with some references if people are interested in reading. Or I can mention some off the top of my head too, if that helps.
Yeah, please mention a few that are
Sure.
impactful enough you've memorized them.
Okay, so there's one paper from I think it's Peniston and Sherry. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but it was published I think in 2006. It's called The Acute and Chronic Toxic Effect of Vitamin A. Very good paper. It's about 30 pages or so, and it's really focused on vitamin A toxicity in a very kind of relatively modern day paper, with some good, studies to kind of back up what they're saying. Now you got to understand at least one of those authors is super pro vitamin A. She's a big advocate of supplementing vitamin A around the world. But the ones that I really think would drive the message home are some of the earlier studies. One done, I think, in 1962 or so from Iowa State University. And this was the effect of hypervitaminosis A on the young pig. I'll send you a link for this, but this is an amazing paper. I think it's about 40 pages long. And what they do in the study, they take a bunch of young pigs and they just give them high vitamin A diet, like a very high vitamin A diet, and devastates these animals. You probably should read those studies on an empty stomach. It destroys these animals, often kills them, causes hemorrhages, brain bleeds, the animals die. They become so dumbed down they can't even feed themselves. They can't get up on their feet. It just wipes them out. But the other one that I like the best is an early study by a guy named Rodell. I think he's in Sweden, Oslo, and it's called hypervitaminosis A again, which is the standard established term for this condition. And he did a study on various animals, poisoning them with vitamin A, various doses of vitamin A, and I think it was like chickens and dogs and quite a variety of different animals, and just devastates these animals, poisons them to death, and just these animals die horrible deaths in these experiments. And so reading, and that paper I think was about 200 pages long. So for each animal he documents, or each species that he tests, he documents exactly the doses that he gave them and what the consequence was and how fast it happens. And in these studies, these early animal studies, like they're poisoning these animals to death in weeks with vitamin A. So I really have a hard time imagining that anybody could read those papers and still believe this to be a vitamin. But those are some good papers. I'll send references.
And so you just mentioned something there, which leads me on to the part 2 of the interview, although we'll release it all one time. So everything that we said so far is really mainstream science, right? There's nothing that anyone would be able to disagree with. Now I do want to get into a little bit more of what you have brought to the world, which I think is potentially extremely revolutionary, as I mentioned right at the beginning. And it's to do with, I think, is it chapter 4 of your Poisoning for Profits book, which for people who I know are not going to read, 400, 500 page book, I always try and get them to at least read just that chapter. And I, again, encourage everyone watching to do that. We'll certainly have a link for it underneath this. And it's the chapter where you talk about the research that discovered vitamin A. Right. And I wonder, for those who I cannot get to even read one chapter of the book because they just don't like to read, is it possible to ask you to do a synopsis, like a breakdown of that? Because I think that is one of the most fascinating stories I've ever read, and I think deserves as wide an audience as we can possibly give it.
Sure. So the definitive study that established vitamin A to be a vitamin was the Woolbach and Howe study from 1925. Now, prior to that, well, you have to kind of know at that period of time in medical science, there was this grand search on for vitamins, right? They were quite sure that there was these hidden nutrients that, were not previously established, and they're on the hunt to find these special vitamins, vital amines. Go ahead.
And who's they? I heard that the Rockefeller Foundation were key funders. Is that accurate, or do you know?
I've heard that about one of the studies, but they, it's usually mostly Americans. There was a few people in Germany that were doing this. Some of the names escape me from the early German researchers, but typically, I'm going to say mostly Americans, and it's actually a small cadre of people. This is not, probably more than 10 or 15 people researching that are kind of laser focused on trying to find these fat soluble vitamins. And so before Woolbach and Howell in 1925, there's some other papers that were doing similar kinds of studies, trying to basically doing elimination diets on animals and then looking at the response of animals. And it's very suspect study to me because vitamin A hadn't been chemically established until after those studies. So for how are they claiming that these are vitamin A free diets when they don't even know how to kind of identify it? It really kind of throws a lot of doubt onto the research. But anyway, what happens? Woolbach and Howell, they get a study going. I think they have 40 or 50 rats in this study, and they put them on what they believe is a purely vitamin A free diet. Primarily based on, they've got starch, they've got some protein, they've got some salt, and they've got Vegemite to provide some of the, I think, B vitamins, I guess. And what happens in this study within, I think 6 to 8 weeks, like most of their animals are either dead or dying or, incredibly sick. And that study was the original study that proved that in the medical literature that vitamin A is this essential vitamin and you'll go blind without it. And so I started to dig into that study and say, well, hold on, this makes absolutely no sense to me just based on, common sense. And what I figured out was in all of these early studies, and even quite modern day studies on rats, there's, and that rat is the de facto model used in medical research for, testing pharmaceuticals and all kinds of other things. So early on, they used casein in the diets of the rats. And what they did is they sterilized the casein. So they boiled it in alcohol and then boiled off the alcohol to sterilize it. And this was the protein source for the animals. But what they didn't know at the time is that casein actually, it encases the vitamin A molecule. And so vitamin A is inside of the casein. So one, their diets were not vitamin A free diets. They were actually quite a lot of vitamin A. But the interesting thing about vitamin A is if you heat it and oxidize it, you will convert it into retinoic acid. So you need this activation energy from chemical reaction point of view. And so what I believe they did is by heating and sterilizing the casein they used in the lab feed for these animals, they were basically poisoning them with retinoic acid. And this is why their animals died in 6 to 8 weeks. But very interesting, right at the same time, there's some other contemporaries, researchers in the United States performing their own vitamin A free diets without heated casein, and their animals survived perfectly. And there's no negative outcome in their studies. But Woolbach and Howell, for whatever reason, I guess maybe they had some academic clout, or they had some leverage somehow. They just, dismissed these other studies, said, no, those other studies aren't valid. Ours is the one that we should go with. And so from that study to where we are today, like 100 years later, that was a study that established vitamin A to be a vitamin, and you'll quickly go blind without it. So not true. And I'd like to kind of mention the research from Tikal and Campbell in the 1980s, I think it was, on casein. And it's quite amazing because, I really liked his book, The China Study. And so what he identified, not really in that book, but in his research at the University of Chicago, he established that casein was one of the most toxic substances. He said, kind of known to man. It's definitely causes cancer. And he, was very adamant that this was an incredibly toxic substance and, we should avoid it. Where he sadly went off the rails was, he blamed all animal proteins. He said, oh, this is an animal protein. Here I have my lab. We're doing these casein studies. We're were killing these animals, inducing breast cancer in rats with casein, on and off. And so he kind of, 50 years later, he proved the toxicity of casein, which was actually the primary food source in the study from Wilbach and Howell way back in 1925. So I think it delegitimizes their study, and obviously I think their study is completely wrong. But nobody's gone back to reproduce it or investigate it, and so here we are.
And the other thing is, weren't they also giving them lard?
They did. They gave them lard, yes. Yeah. Which in itself also is a source of retinoic acid, right? So two sources of retinoic acid in their vitamin A free diet. And that's the active form of vitamin A, right? So those animals should have did incredibly well if this was a vitamin, but of course it's not.
So just to summarize, they proved that you don't need they proved that you need vitamin A by giving a completely vitamin A free diet from their perspective,
right?
And watch these animals die a horrific death.
Right.
Again, as you said earlier with the pig study, like I remember reading the description of it, right? It's like lesions, like the lesions in their mouth and in their eyes and everywhere. Like they're in constant agony, their body's falling to pieces. And they managed to induce that within 6 to 8 weeks. And they were like, wow, a lack of that vitamin A is really bad,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
actually, they were giving them milk protein, casein, and lard, both of which are high in retinoic acid, which is the most poisonous form of vitamin A. Is that right?
That's what I believe, yeah.
So rather than proving that a deficiency of vitamin A causes you to have this horrific death, all they really proved from your understanding of the research is that giving very large amounts of retinoic acid causes a horrific death. But they just didn't know that. And were they able to measure even retinoic acid at the time they did those studies?
No. I think vitamin A, if I'm might be wrong by a few years here. I think vitamin A was actually isolated and, the molecular structure was defined in kind of around 1930. But then it wasn't until 1960 that retinoic acid was discovered. So, 35 years later, we've got this other form of vitamin A called retinoic acid, which is incredibly toxic. And so no, they would have had no way of knowing that.
Wow. And so it's kind of an amazing thing. And I think probably this message is going to fall on more fertile ground, I would say, now than it would have done a few years ago, because I think there's a lot more people questioning from first principles a lot of medical science than there used to be. Which is a good thing, because it's always good to ask questions, right, and to think for yourself. In terms of some of the other aspects of that, I would highly recommend that you read Grant's book. I don't think we're going to be able to really talk about it on YouTube, what that means, that that the medical establishment would make such a gargantuan mistake. But I would say that in his book, Grant deals very well with taking that hypothesis of the idea that, actually vitamin A isn't an essential nutrient at all, it's just a poison, and then, runs with that and makes lots of speculation based on that, which I found personally to be very profound and, very compelling in terms of whether they might actually be accurate or not. So tell us, Grant, like a lot of people ask this question right at the beginning, but I always want to start with people in terms of, getting them to share what their big breakthrough is, what they're most passionate about. But I would love to hear your background as to how you got into it as well. Because you're not a doctor, right? You come from a different background. Right. I'm not a doctor. That's not a negative to me, but I'm just saying, what led you to? But you're obviously very able to read scientific studies, which I think the average person isn't, and you have the patience as well as the ability to actually have done so. So, what's your background? What led you to being motivated enough to get into this and then to share it with the world? Sure.
Well, my background, I'm a civil engineer, so trained as a professional civil engineer. But in university, I also did a lot of chemistry and physics. And so it was very kind of well acclimatized to the scientific method and understanding science. I love science. I'm a science guy. And, just going along with my life. And then in 2006, surprisingly diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, which was, pretty early diagnosis to have chronic kidney disease, but it was what it was, and I wasn't going to do anything about it. So I just kind of continued to go on with my life. And then in 2014, I started to break out with eczema, and I've never experienced it before. I didn't even know what the word was before that. And I had it very severely. So it was pretty much body-wide eczema, kind of head to toe. Maybe it wasn't all over my body all at once, but it was moving all over my body, and pretty much every square inch of my body was covered with severe eczema. So I was getting very, very sick. And I considered that was probably just kind of the end stage of the chronic kidney disease. So that's kind of a manifestation of the chronic kidney disease. And of course, I go to my doctor. I've got this huge inflamed body-wide rash. And, he tells me, you got eczema and autoimmune disease. And he gives me this little, 2-ounce tube of steroid cream. He tells me to go home and take it easy on the steroid cream because there's side effects. And, but it's kind of, kind of longer story, but he kind of wrote me off, meaning, okay, this he's on his way out, and there's nothing we're going to do for him, and sent me home. And, walk out of there, and I got this little tiny tube of steroid cream. I was like, oh, holy man, I need a bathtub full of this stuff. This is not going to cut it. And then, knowing nothing about eczema, and, coming to the realization, I have to be able to at least try to figure out something for some relief, right? Because it's a pretty horrible condition. And I had also, by that time, gotten very, very sick. I was, chronically fatigued, incredibly weak. All kinds of health issues were cropping up. And so the eczema was just kind of the finishing stage of it, I guess. And so I was looking for, what can I do to at least alleviate some of the pain? So, got on Google and started searching eczema. And what was fascinating to me is there's, a lot of documentation of what's called trigger foods. So, and as it turns out, a lot of autoimmune diseases document trigger foods. And I went out to the American Eczema Association, another similar association in Canada, and they talk about trigger foods. And both these associations, and actually the Canadian Crohn's and Colitis Association, have something similar. Yes, there's trigger foods for Crohn's and colitis, but all of them say, your disease condition is not related to food. That didn't make any sense to me. Like, how could we have these, quote, trigger foods, and yet, the medical establishment saying your disease is not related? Well, that didn't make sense. So what I did was wrote down a list of the trigger foods, which were, for eczema, was like the common trigger foods were, eggs, milk, dairy, cheese, tomatoes, bell peppers, fish, and a few others. And I went out to the National Institute. It's actually a national database in the United States. And it was the, one of the agricultural databases maintained by the US government. And I got all the molecular compounds from all of the trigger foods, and I put them into a database. And I just, started doing queries and saying, what's common between all these foods? And what pops out is vitamin A. And so, I go, isn't that strange? Right? I haven't been eating a lot of vitamin A. I didn't think I was just eating kind of a normal standard American diet kind of thing. And then from there, I go, well, what are the symptoms if you get too much vitamin A? So, go out, symptoms of vitamin A toxicity, and go through the list. And it's like, the perfect, 30 item list. Okay, here are all the conditions of vitamin A toxicity. And I've got pretty much every one of them. And so from there, I decided, I'm just going to do a simple, really stupid experiment. I thought it was ridiculous to just even be embarrassed to tell anybody that I did it at the time. I decided I'm just going to eliminate all foods that have any vitamin A from my diet and see what happens. And that's how I got into this and went from there.
And well, tell us a bit more. So what happened as a result of doing that?
Well, that's a good question, because I gave myself 3 weeks. So when I started that vitamin A elimination diet, I gave myself 3 weeks, and it's like first week, nothing. Second week, nothing. Third week, nothing. Like same, just really, really poor health. And then I was at this kind of, tipping point. Oh, this is foolish. I shouldn't do this. This is, anyway. So I said to myself, I'll give it one more day. And so one more day. And what happened was, leading up to that, I had about 10 years of chronic joint pains, most specifically in my knees. Like I would sleep every night with a heating pad wrapped around my knees. I could not sleep without that heating pad. And on, like the 22nd day, I think it was 22nd or 23rd day, my joint pain in my knees disappeared. And all kinds of just really profound changes in my overall sense of well-being and health, like my chronic fatigue evaporated and my mental clarity just zoomed to 10x of what it was before. So this really profound response. And I was, okay, maybe I'm kind of sort of onto something here. And then after that, a very long, slow, bumpy road to get to where I am today. So that's kind of the story there. But, interestingly enough, in 2006, when I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, I was given kind of 5 to 6 years remaining. And so, getting very sick by 2014 was, kind of in alignment with that prognosis. But, here I am now in, what is that? 20 years. Yeah, 2023. I was just trying to calculate the number of years.
Almost 17 years, right?
17 years later, and I'm doing pretty well. My chronic kidney disease is gone, and I just gotten another testimonial from somebody that they've reversed their chronic kidney disease. So, that's how I got into this.
Fantastic. And the eczema?
I'm sorry. Oh, the eczema. Yeah, it's gone. I'm completely recovered from that. That was.
And how long have you been doing it now?
I'm close to 9 years. So this is, in August, I'll be 9 years with no vitamin A in my diet.
Because when people hear this kind of thing, like an easy way to dismiss it is to say it's the placebo effect. But I've studied the placebo effect quite a lot. And while the placebo effect is very powerful, it doesn't tend to be very long lasting. Meaning if you believe this is going to help you, it might make it go away for a few months or maybe a year, but it's not going to make it go away for 9 years.
Right.
To me, that fundamentally proves that there's something very real and biochemical going on.
Yeah. And so kind of to finish the story and my own personal story. So I don't know if I'm dragging this out too long, but
No, we want to hear.
Okay,
absolutely.
So what I did was, when I was really sick, I was having these really bad cognitive function capabilities and all kinds of signs of early dementia, or early Alzheimer's. And I wasn't really too worried about that because I knew the kidney disease was going to take me out early. So that didn't really matter to me so much. But when I had this really profound improvement in my mental clarity and just, amazing difference. The next morning I got up and I went out to the website and I was wondering what happened to the rate of Alzheimer's dementia in Atlantic Canada after, I think it was, what was the year? Anyway, I think it was, I've forgotten the year now. I think it was like 1993 or something. So what happened? Historically for the last 500 years, Canada has had this very big cod fishery out on the East Coast. And I think in 1993, that fish stock was, fished almost to extinction, and the government abruptly, like overnight, closed down that cod fishery. And codfish, of course, is really high in vitamin A. So I was just curious, what happened to the rate of, and also coincidentally, the rate of Alzheimer's dementia in Eastern Canada is the highest in the world, or was the highest in the world. And Canadians well knew that. Like that was kind of a, I guess anybody kind of in tune with anything in Canada, you kind of knew that, that region of Canada, for whatever reason, has really bad health. And so got out on the web, and here we are, 10 years later, I said, what happened to the rate of Alzheimer's? And it was almost cut in, I think it was almost cut in half after they closed the cod fishery 10 years later. And so was Crohn's and colitis. So we have this, big population with, history of the worst disease rate for those two diseases in not only in Canada, in the world, and it was cut back into half. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I think I'm probably onto something here. From there, I said, it's important enough where I'm going to write these ebooks, try to make them, compelling enough with enough evidence to try to get other people to participate with this. And I've been pretty successful. Like there's many thousands of people, I want to say maybe, 10,000 people from around the world who are now participating in this and using this diet experiment and sharing their results. And I'm not a one-off by any means. There's lots of people reporting, quite remarkable recoveries in their health. The downside to it, or the reality of it is, it's a very long, slow process to recover your health after you've been, seriously poisoned with vitamin A.
I think this is the case of all fat-soluble toxins. It takes a long time for them to build up, as you said earlier, but it also takes a long time to get them out.
Yeah,
unfortunately. I would recommend one of the reasons I'd recommend going to Grant's website. I mean, the number one reason would be to read his articles in his books. But another one is he periodically does tests, right? Not tests, surveys of his audience. And you can actually see, published there, unedited, the responses from people about whether it's helped them or not. And it's, about a wide range of issues, right? And it's very interesting to see. I wish all people who taught a specific diet or exercise or health regime would do that. Actually, allow like unbiased feedback, and I'd like to do that myself. I used to do it for my programs back in the day, but it's very good to be able to see. And I can tell you're a scientist, engineer, scientists, it's the same kind of thing ultimately, right? You just want to get the data, and you obviously you want to help people, but you also want to make sure it's working, right? You want to actually see
absolutely.
that it's helping people.
And I'm no longer alone. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to move on to the next thing. Well, let me ask you about, because you mentioned about the cod fishery, and I was like on the fence about asking this question, but I think I will. And if it becomes too controversial, we can always edit it out. And it's this issue of, for the YouTube version anyway, but it's this issue of like the health epidemic. So starting around the 1980s, there was just an explosion of autoimmunity and allergies that wasn't really there before. And it does depend on which country as to the year. There's different speculation about, but it's been pretty much worldwide, certainly throughout the Western world. There's different speculation as to what would cause it. One is the thing that will get you banned from the channel if you talk about it. From the platform. But one of the things that and I'm sure you know what I mean. You talk about it in your book, and
I do.
I recommend people read your book. But there are other theories, right? And one of them is the introduction of seed oils in very large quantities in the 80s is blamed for this issue. Back when before most fats that were consumed were saturated fats and animal fats, and then there was this switch to heart healthy margarine, right, and vegetable oils. So this is often blamed on but this seems like another potential candidate because, and I want you to correct me on this because I haven't done enough research on it, but was there like a push at some point to, because we talked about the natural source of vitamin A, right? You can get it from liver and sweet potatoes and all the rest of it. But was there a push at some point to start fortifying, or if we believe it's a poison, contaminating the food supply with it on quite a wide scale? And do you know enough about that? You feel confident to speak about that?
Yeah, I sure do. So in 1972-74, vitamin A was mandated into foods in North America. So in Canada, it's mandated into dairy. So all milk is fortified with vitamin A. Margarines, butter. So, you can't legitimately go get a milk product in Canada without having vitamin A added to it. I shouldn't say added, but a lot of products have. There's a certain, I guess, best way of saying it. There's a certain concentration of vitamin A that's supposed to be in the product. And if it's not there naturally, they top it up with synthetic vitamin A or vitamin A palmitate, which is not really that synthetic. Big push in Canada. In the United States, it was worse because they added vitamin A into dairy in the United States by legislation. This is legislated into the food. This is not optional. So dairy producers cannot opt out. And worse in the United States because they added it to a lot of flour and bread products in their vitamin A. Breakfast cereals in the United States have vitamin A added to it. And then kind of at the same time, the World Health Organization got really kind of into high gear on this, and they were running supplementation programs and still are today. Actually, one of the authors that I mentioned before is one of the big proponents of these programs. And they are running vitamin A supplementation programs in about 110 countries around the world. And what they've done, and I found a paper where they kind of laid out their plan, was they're going to put it into regional food sources, like in Canada, where common for people to have milk and dairy, but South America, where they don't have refrigeration, they need another vector for delivering, and they use sugar. So in South America, sugar is laced with vitamin A, and in Southeast Asia, it was put into MSG. So even if MSG is bad enough on its own, they've added vitamin A to it. A lot of crops are being currently kind of pushed over from natural, white rice to golden rice, which is golden rice fortified with or genetically modified to produce beta carotene. So yeah, massive push to increase the vitamin A content right around that time frame. And like I said, it takes a decade to accumulate. So the timing is really good. You start introducing this additional vitamin A into the food source in 1972, 74, and then kind of by the mid 80s, you got this epidemic of disease. And something like seed oils and canola oils would only make it worse because they also have vitamin A in it.
Interesting. And in your book, you actually talk about the connection between vitamin A and the thing that we can't mention on YouTube. So if people know what we're talking about, I definitely recommend reading that, reading up in your book about that. Yeah, fascinating. It does make a lot of sense to me for reasons I won't go into right now. But I also noticed they add it to baby food. Isn't that great? Along with the corn oil and soy and all the rest of it.
It is terrible, and there was a really good study. Rothman is the guy's name. He published a study, I think in I don't know, I'd have to go back. In the 1980s, maybe 79 or something. It's called Rothman. And he documented the increased birth defects in mothers being exposed to even moderate amounts of vitamin A. And so, he was one of the early researchers raising the alarm about, the toxicity of vitamin A in early childhood and fetal development, and kind of completely ignored, just tossed aside. And they add it to baby food and formulas. It's terrible, in my opinion.
And this might be another category of person that you would recommend, like had a lower vitamin A. So we said earlier, if you're healthy and young, then you could probably do okay just avoiding the highest sources. But would you say if you're pregnant or planning to be pregnant, or if you are very young, that it would be better to minimize the amount that you have more?
Oh yeah, that's in the medical literature. Like you can read, vitamin A advice for pregnant mothers. Maybe you'll find a lot of literature that says, vitamin A is essential for fetal development. But then, you turn the page of the same study and go, but there's this warning, if you get too much of it, it could lead to birth defects. Super well documented, being a substance that can cause serious birth defects. So pregnant mothers should be very careful, and or women planning to get pregnant.
And the interesting thing is the scale, right? I mean, that's what you just said is true for almost every nutrient, right? What they call, so, a certain amount is healthy, a certain amount is toxic. But the interesting thing about the vitamin A from what I saw is the level that they say you need is not that different from the level that they say is toxic.
That's right. Yeah. In the Rothman paper, if you can find it, I think, so at that time when he did that, I think the RDA for vitamin A for women was, I'm going to say 3,000 international units. And he was saying, you can get that between, breakfast and lunch. And if you go up to, I think it was 7,500, he documents an increase in the rate of birth defects. And if you go 2x that, doubles the probability of having birth defects. And it's like this linear thing. And you're right, it's not 10x, it's like, 2x and 4x. And, you could easily do that with dietary sources.
Which is easy to do.
Yeah, easy to do.
Yeah. Well, and easy to do if you're trying to be healthy. One of the mysteries I've been trying to unpick for the last dozen or so years at least, Grant, is I've worked with a lot of people who are very committed to health compared to the average person, right? They don't smoke, they don't drink, they do everything that you're supposed to do. And I've been one of them. And to some degree, and then they're like less healthy than people who do all that stuff.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, how is it possible? All I do is drink green smoothies, or, you know, if you're a carnivore type, or I eat loads of liver, I eat loads of eggs. Like, how could I be ill? And so, you know, this is such a mind-blowing thing that's hard to get your head around.
Yeah.
Actually, you might have been better off if you were just, you know, eating pizza and fries and stuff, like you said, to some degree. I mean, look, that stuff is still adulterated with vitamin A as well as a bunch of other chemicals. I'm not saying it's great, but it's just interesting that that's even vaguely comparable, you know, once you start to understand this. These so-called health foods are often not that healthy.
Yeah, and I think I was going to go back to, you know, my comment about, you know, people, you know, looking at food groups like T. Colin Campbell. You know, like I said, I really like that guy, but he came so close to figuring this out, and then he missed it because he blamed a food group, right? And I'm going, no, it's not about carnivore or vegan or anything else. It's the body doesn't look at, you know, food that comes in as, oh, this came from an animal source or a plant source. No, it looks at it as it's a molecule, right? So we need, and that's what the pharmaceutical industry does too. Like every product from the pharmaceutical industry they're looking at molecules. They're building and marketing molecules. And so, you know, we need to go down to, you know, the molecular level and say, okay, what is it, you know, about our food that has a certain, you know, probability of having toxic molecules versus good molecules? Forget about the food groups thing. That's a distraction, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I mean, what I've been teaching for years is that ultimately toxicity is one of the main things. And so what I feel you've alerted me to is, you know, one of the, not just another toxin that is really bad, but more importantly, this is a toxin that we've been like eating on purpose, thinking that it's good for us, which is the worst kind of toxin of all, in a way. Yeah. Maybe paying good money to get more of this toxin, thinking that we're helping ourselves and really we're hurting. So it's something that we need to know. Let me ask you about something else, Grant, before we finish. So I did a bit of research, and tell me if I'm wrong, but, you know, so I'm based in the UK, and it does seem like the UK food supply is less contaminated with vitamin A. I think it's still added to more stuff than it should be, but it's often on the label. I don't believe it's added like wholesale to grain or anything.
I think that's
like
accurate.
it is in the US.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Yeah. So dairy, my understanding in the UK, is not supplemented with vitamin A in the UK.
Okay. And I think this might be, although we're hardly fantastically healthy in the UK, I do think it's probably why the prevalence of obesity and autoimmunity and allergies is even worse in the US than it is in the UK. It's certainly a possibility anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's other factors as well. But anyway, so when I was doing that research, looking at the amount and everything, kind of similar to what you did, it sounds like, but maybe not exhaustive, I saw a comment underneath someone else who'd interviewed you talking about their cat. And they said, oh, my cat was like lame. It like couldn't walk. And then I stopped giving it vitamin A, and then it got better. And I was like, you know what? We have this Bengal cat, which is this leopard cross. Okay. And she had been limping around for like a month. And the vet didn't think there's anything wrong with her. Nothing they could say, you know, she could go and see a neurologist or something. And I was like, ugh, you know. Often those surgical interventions don't even work for humans. Right. I'm very skeptical about whether it's going to be helpful for a cat, as much as I love that cat. And I was like, you know what, and then I started looking at the cat food, and I realized, so the average RDA that I see recommended for vitamin A for humans that might be 70 or 80 kilos is like 3,000 IU of vitamin A. Mm-hmm. The average amount of, the recommended amount of vitamin A for a cat that is 4 kilos is 5,000 IUs of vitamin A. Wow. So they're literally, and unlike with humans in the United Kingdom, every pet food pretty much is got that vitamin A added. They either put a lot of liver in there if you're buying more natural raw ones, right? Or if you're buying more kind of, you know, store-bought packaged ones, then they put just vitamin A in there. And it's actually really difficult to find any pet food that doesn't contain it. And, you know, largely we just give them raw meat. Anyway, so for this cat, I started giving her just raw chicken. Okay. And it took a while because we were moving house. So it was another month where I kind of intermittently sometimes gave her vitamin A and often didn't. And she just still didn't get better. No change. And then I started to give her a 100% vitamin A free diet. Mm-hmm. And within about a month, she was 100% better. And she'd kind of faded away while she was limping. Like she was like, smaller. And now she's like this fierce cat. Like my wife's actually kind of scared of her. Like they're like, and she's like strong and muscular and like, like powerful. And she'll be jumping, racing up trees and all the rest of it. And I'm like, I know that's anecdotal, but I wonder if you can comment, I guess one of the advantages of animals over human is the accumulation is less. She wasn't even that old. She was only, I don't know, a year old or something. Wow. So I guess the accumulation is less for an animal, but then also the detoxification process would be quicker as well, right? For that same reason.
Maybe so. I don't know. Yeah.
So 2 questions about this. I realize you may not know the answer to either, but first of all, for our pets, because a lot of people I've noticed they care more about their cat or dog's well-being than they do their own. So is there any, you've made the assertion earlier, which I encourage people to not believe or disbelieve, but research, right? Looking at your own works and looking at papers, that humans don't actually need vitamin A. Have you done research in the area of whether animals actually need it?
Well, in my opinion, there's no way an animal needs it. It's a poison. And look at that study from Rodell. If you want evidence, I'll send you that Rodell or a link to that Rodell paper. Read that through, and if that should just erase any doubt that this is a vitamin. Hopefully, and just to add to your anecdotal story,
do you think that?
Go ahead.
Sorry, do you think that a predator like a cat or a dog, dogs are it's technically omnivores, but like a more predatory animal maybe is more able to handle it? That's why they give such an absurd amount to them compared to...
I don't know. I think it's maybe just kind of one of these inadvertent things, because I think you're right. I think, from the, meat producing industry, they need to get rid of all the liver they produce and they put it into animal foods. Same thing in North America. All the dog food and cat food has a lot of liver in it, so it's high in vitamin A just because of that. Not kind of by design. I think it's just a side effect of the way they make that product. But
interesting.
I will add.
So you're saying the standard came first. So sorry, the habit was first, and then they just created a standard. Oh, this is how much vitamin A all food has to have.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't know if there's some regulatory. I highly doubt there's any regulations on vitamin A content of animal foods, but I don't know. But I'll just add to your anecdote.
There definitely seems to be an industry standard. I'll tell you.
Really?
The amount
Okay.
that
I didn't know
at
that.
least they all make sure that it has 5,000 AUs for a daily supply, roughly. That's what I found. It's actually amazing.
Crazy.
I'm glad I can teach you something about vitamin A.
Yeah,
you don't know. And maybe it's not the case in Canada or the US, but it's certainly the case in the UK. I'm not saying it's government mandated, but it seems to be a universal industry standard. They put this ridiculous high amount in all food. Yeah. And if it's not liver, then it's just artificial retinol.
Yeah, well, no wonder so many people's animals are sick.
Yeah. And so the other question was about if you think they're more able to deal with this poison, maybe because, they would have had to eat more liver naturally than humans or something. And I realize this is speculation.
I don't know. Sorry, I just don't know.
Okay, fair enough. And I wonder if you'd seen studies on it as well. Because obviously you talked about the studies with rats, mice, and pigs. What about cattle? Do they feed it to like larger animals in higher doses?
I don't know about cattle, but most certainly chickens. So any of the kind of factory farm chickens, they have really high vitamin A concentrations in their feed. Like the factory feed is juiced up on vitamin A big time here, at least in North America. I don't know about cattle, but cattle you wouldn't really need. They're constantly eating grass, which is high in carotenoids, so they're going to get, if you assume that this is a vitamin, they're going to get a lot of it in their natural grass feed.
So you mentioned earlier, Grant, about how some of the other poisons that I mentioned, like maybe mold or heavy metals, might interact with vitamin A in the sense that together they would make the situation worse.
Yeah.
And it could be an explanatory. It could be the hidden variable, right? It could be an explanatory model or an explanation, maybe not the only one, but why a bunch of people can live in a house and one of them or two of them get really sick with mold and one or two of them don't. Yeah. It's because of the toxic load they have to deal with. Another, obviously, variable will be how well they're able to process the toxins, but it definitely could be another variable.
Absolutely.
So what would you say in your experience, if you have any, are other toxins that you see often go hand in hand with vitamin A toxicity that make it worse? Is there anything in particular?
Well, glyphosate has been on kind of my radar for quite a while. So I've seen some documentation that glyphosate is impeding the vitamin A detoxification process. So glyphosate could be a pretty important factor. I haven't looked at it at all really in depth. It's on my to-do list, and I'm actually really quite interested in that topic. I just haven't had the cycles to look at it. But so that's one. But and I think the way a lot of these toxins work is they damage DNA, and so vitamin A is damaging DNA. Other toxins are damaging DNA, and it's once that happens, and things start to break down.
Excellent. Can I ask you about, is it glucuronidation? Because, so retinoic acid is the most poisonous form of vitamin A, right? Am I right in saying that glucuronidation is the process by which the body would convert that into something that can actually be excreted from the body?
Yes.
Retinoic acid?
Yeah, I think that's correct. And so retinoic acid goes through this enzyme called... it's kind of the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and there's a whole group of those enzymes under that kind of umbrella categorization. So they're involved in the detoxification of retinoic acid. Early on, I was kind of looking for, quote, an antidote. I've never found anything that I would consider an antidote to retinoic acid. I think we're just kind of... right now I'm in the position where I think it's just time, right? Time is really the biggest factor in recovering. It's my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
But theoretically, anything that genuinely supported the activity of glucuronidation could speed up the process. Theoretically.
I think so. Yeah, theoretically. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Very, very interesting. And so from your point of view, I don't know if you want to answer this, please tell me if you don't, but is there any practical advice you would give to people who are considering, reducing their vitamin A significantly?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I'm in this for, almost 9 years. My goal is to go 10 years with no vitamin A in my diet. And the reason I'm doing that now, my health is really good, so I don't need to continue this restrictive diet. But I want to prove that, a human can go 10 years with no vitamin A in their diet. To disprove this whole claim that this is a vitamin. So that's my personal mission. But I'd highly recommend people, do their own research, read what I've written, and read, if you're really interested in long-term health and sustainability of long-term health, then I would put this at the very top of your reading list. And then, if you come to the same conclusion that I'm coming to and other people are coming to, then you can kind of go from there. And I think, once again, to repeat, just, stay away from the big ticket items, the high vitamin A items, not to go too crazy. Now, if someone is really sick and has serious chronic disease, then, this should be even higher on the priority list for reading. And then, knowing that, there's a whole bunch of people trying to reverse their chronic disease condition. You go out to my forum and listen or read about what other people are doing, and just kind of get in tune with what's going on there, because it is a tricky process. So if you are in a disease condition that you think is caused by vitamin A toxicity, I naively thought, okay, I'll just eliminate all the vitamin A from my diet and we can get out of this, which worked for me. But other people are going through a bumpy road. Like, there are a lot of people that actually go through this process quite smoothly and do recover their health. There's a lot of people where it's much more non-predictable. And so I just put out a blog post like last week about avoiding this detox trap that some people find themselves in. So that's something that people need to be aware of. Like, it's not a simple, straightforward process. Just reduce your vitamin A and turn around your health. It's a long, bumpy road.
And so, if someone wanted to be safe or do the less extreme version, but still listen to what you said here today, is a potential strategy. Is it the case? A lot of the time, if you realize that something is bad for you and then you completely remove it, your body's response to it is actually a lot stronger, and it's better to just reduce it a bit slowly and gradually over time, Would you say this is an example of that in your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So a good analogy would be, somebody who's, chronic alcoholic, if they quit cold turkey, they can get in very, very big trouble and maybe even die. So you've got to taper yourself off, slowly off of this. The cold turkey route is not really advisable, especially if you're in a, poor health condition. Yeah, it's true.
And the last question is about testing. So I think I saw in one of your articles that, you have been doing some testing and you've got your levels of retinol down to a very low level. Have I remembered that correctly?
Yeah.
So that you can prove that human beings don't need it, basically, as you said earlier.
Yeah. My ultimate goal is to get a vitamin A serum level that says 0.0. So the last one I did was, I think 4 years ago now, and I was at 0.1. So 0.7 is considered severely vitamin A deficient. So, and I got an alert when I had my last one 4 years ago at 0.1, recommendation, oh my God, you're vitamin A deficient, do something. So that's me personally. There's a lot of other people now that are doing their own vitamin A serum level tests, and it's a slow process. It's a very slow process for a lot of people, but for whatever reason, I'm very low. And I think by, my 10-year point, I hope to be at 0.0. And so, that's my goal.
And is this trans retinol or what type of vitamin A?
Okay. So if your viewers or readers don't know about, don't have a background in chemistry, you come across these terms, trans and cis, and they're, in this context, it's kind of meaningless. You don't need to get hung up on that. That's all it means is kind of what side of the isomer of the double bond is on. And so, and the other term is, for your listeners, is you'll come across, this term, an isomer in chemistry. So an isomer is the same molecular structure. It's just got a different 3D spatial shape to it. And so, but people don't need to get hung up on, all trans versus, all trans or all cis retinoic acid. They're just variations to it.
Well, I guess what I meant more is it beta carotene you're testing? Is it retinol? Is it retinol? Is it retinoic acid?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. No, when you go get a blood test, they will typically not ever, just maybe not ever. It would be a very unique demand to get a beta carotene serum level and retinoic acid as far as.
I've had beta carotene from a company called Genereux Diagnostics, and it was very high. And retinol was right at the top of their reference range when I tested it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If I went to my doctor here in Canada and asked them for a beta carotene test, they just say, no, we don't do that. And same with retinoic acid, like as far as I know, that's not generally available. So when you go get a blood serum level for vitamin A, what they're measuring is retinol, but it's even more specific, so retinol that's in your serum is wrapped up in this, what's called a retinol binding protein. So this little encapsulation of it. And, what they do when they take the blood draw for the test, they wash it out in cyclohexane and try to wash that retinol molecule out from that retinol binding protein. And that's what they're measuring. So they're measuring retinol typically with a serum level test. And even, there's another one that, would be nice to get a measure on is retinol esters, but, that's not generally available either. So, to get a really clear picture of what's going on in serum, you'd kind of need to measure all of those, which is kind of out of reach for most people. So I would say just don't even worry about it.
Yeah, I've only seen beta carotene and retinol, but retinol is much more cheap and easily available. I'll put a link underneath for people in Europe at least where you can get it done fairly easily. And order it yourself without a doctor for those who want to test. And so for those who test, Grant, so as I said, mine was right at the top of the reference range, so that's pretty clear that I could do with some less. Like no doctor is going to go, oh my God, you're not going to have enough, right? So that's pretty easy in my case, and same for my wife. It's right at the top of the reference range. What about for someone who has it lower in the reference range?
Well, yeah, the other thing that people need to appreciate, like your serum level of vitamin A is not a good indication of your tissue storage or your liver storage of vitamin A. It can be, it's all over the map, right? So it's not the gold standard, I guess, for measuring how much vitamin A you have in your body. But yeah, you in the long term, you do want to reduce that serum level of vitamin A, as best you can, I guess. And it's people testing on my forum, it's like 3 years, and it's, very slow. It's amazingly slow progress, but anyway, it is what it is.
As long as you feel better, that's the main thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Grant. You've been very generous. I would appreciate it if you send me those studies that you referenced today, or as many of them
I will,
as you're able to find.
Yeah.
And for people who want to find out more, I think we've really spoken to this, but let's just summarize what would be their next steps.
So I've got, a blog, Genereux .blog, and I've got 3 ebooks there that people can download. They're free. There's no charge. There's no hooks, nothing there, no advertising, completely free. That's, kind of my chronology of going through this process and this very layman perspective on this. And then if you look at the reference studies that I'll send in the link. And also there's another fellow that I would highly recommend you look at. His name is Anthony Mawson. So he's been a long-term vitamin A researcher. He's at the University of Mississippi in Jackson. He's got about 20 papers on vitamin A toxicity and associating with a lot of different disease conditions. A lot of kind of focus on diabetes. So that would be kind of mainstream academic research that you could read to get another perspective on it. I guess that's about it.
Thank you. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that you're making that available for free to everyone. And there's no upsells, there's no sales. I think there's no way of buying anything on your website if you wanted to.
Well, you know what? It's kind of funny. I put up a little merch thing to maybe try to pay for my my hosting service on my blog.
Okay.
But not a single person has purchased a single item. So I haven't made a dime off of this. So not a dime.
Maybe do a donate thing with the books, I would recommend, so then people can show their appreciation that way. Yeah. I'm not in it for the money. This is just, me trying to get the message out. That's the main thing I wanted to emphasize. Yeah. So, Grant is absolutely, whether you agree with him or not, you can be absolutely certain that he's not saying it. He's not trying to sell you anything of any kind. He's doing this because he cares and he believes it's the right thing. And that in itself is a fairly rare thing in this world. So thank you very much for caring enough to not just find this out, but to put it out there.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I think, my perspective is that, I'm older, right? I'm 63. And, when I was in my 40s, my expectation was that historical expectation in Canada was, people in Canada don't get sick until their mid 80s or 90s, and they're generally doing pretty well in their older age. And now I've seen that completely reversed. Like people are, a lot of people are very sick by, 60, 65. And so I believe, this downturn in health in North America is devastating. And so whatever I can do to, my 2 cents worth and trying to put a little dent in that is part of my mission.
Well, thank you. I hope that we can magnify your message over time and make it into a big dent, because I think this is something the world needs to hear. It may not be the only health issue that we face, right? But it could be that missing link, that thing where you've tried so many other things and you think you're living healthy and you think you're eating the right thing and all the rest of it, and you're still not where you want to be. This may well be the thing, if you've tried a lot of the more obvious stuff, that could be your Achilles heel. So that's why I wanted to bring it to you as soon as possible. As I said, I've witnessed my cat spontaneously become completely healed from it. Could be a coincidence or whatever, but as I said, she had several months of limping, not getting better, and then just suddenly completely transformed after a few weeks of not having vitamin A. So, and for myself, I had this chronic health issue for several years of pain in my gallbladder, which has diminished more and more the less and less vitamin A I've had. So I'm what's the word? Not convinced 100% yet, but I feel that what you said makes a lot of sense in theory, and I'm starting to see some very interesting results in practice. And as you said, looking at your forum, listening to a lot of other people who have had the experience, and Not every single person, as you said, gets better immediately. It's not about that, but if statistics are much better than anecdotes, and you've done a good job of collecting those statistics with those surveys on your site, and you can see that overall the trend is that people feel very significantly better in a huge variety of different ways when they try this approach. So I recommend again that people check that out. So thank you very much for your time, Grant. I very much appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thank you for helping get the message out. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwyn and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwyn has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.